It's the Funny Comics Fan Club. Hello, good evening, and welcome to the Funny Comics Fan Club.
And who are you?
I am not Dr. John Dredge. And who are you?
I actually am Dr. Mike Hibbett.
Are you like a doctor of comics?
I am a doctor. I was just thinking, we've never actually explained that. I keep saying it.
Yeah.
And that's I am, in fact, a doctor of comics. Yes.
Well,
I have a PhD in
congratulations.
Thank you very much.
And so you're ideal for this podcast, really, aren't you?
It's a good job. It's a good job you asked me, to be honest. Yeah. I don't know what you're doing here.
I've got no idea.
Completely unqualified.
Yeah, I just stumbled in out of the rain. But yeah, what are we looking at today, Dr. Mark?
Well, Mr. Dredge, what we're looking at today is a copy of TV comic.
Oh.
Yes.
Ah.
This is the oldest comic we've had so far. This is from September 1970, issue number 980.
And so this was issued the year I was born, so I don't remember too much about it.
No, I don't remember. I was a few months old when this came out.
Yeah, so you probably remember more about it than I do.
I remember it verbatim. But I do remember TV comic itself.
I remember TV comic very, very clearly.
Did you buy it?
Yes. I actually really loved TV comic in the 80s, particularly the early 80s, because it just had, I was 10 years old and everything I liked on television was pretty much represented in TV comic at the time. So it had Battle of the Planets, which was an old action cartoon, had Captain Caveman in it, Boss Cat or Top Cat if you're American. But what's odd about TV comic, one of the odd things about it...
One of the many odd things about it.
One of the many odd things about it is that not all of the comic strips have been on television.
No, and some of them are TV themed, aren't they? There's like the TV Terrors, which is about some kids who watch telly.
Is that what are they called? The TV Terrors?
The TV Terrors, yeah.
See, they go to the cinema every week, I thought.
No, you've missed the point of the TV Terrors there, John.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm not a doctor.
It's not. And I can't heal you of this.
No.
It's not called like cinema shenanigans or anything.
No.
What happens in TV Terrors is the idea is they go to a TV studio.
Do they?
Yeah.
Do they?
Yeah. And
I thought they went to a cinema.
No, they're called the TV Terrors. Why would they be called the TV Terrors if they went to the cinema?
Well, I was going to ask you that.
Oh, I'm telling you now. This is so. But there's this guy. So
because I thought he was a commissioner at a cinema. You see, the main guy in it. I thought he was a commissioner at a cinema because he's always telling them to clear off.
Yeah. Well,
I've obviously completely missed the point of this. I'm sorry. I apologise.
We're remedying a 50-year-long misapprehension.
Maybe I saw one of them once where they went to the cinema or something. I don't know. Maybe just my mind is addled.
That is true.
But
I think what happens is, so there's the main character, this apart from the kids, is a bloke called Oppet.
Hoppet.
Is he called Hoppet? Yes. And he looks like a sergeant major. He has a big old sergeant major's twiddly moustache. He's dressed like, as you say, commissioner, but I believe he was the commissioner at the TV studios. So the TV Terrors were always trying to get into the TV studios, and he would tell them to hop it.
It's all becoming clear to me now. All becoming clear. Now I understand. It's a good job you're here.
It is a good job. Is there anything else I can help you with?
No, not at the moment. But it's okay. So I completely miscombobulated that. No wonder they're not called the Cinema Terrors or something like that. Because that would okay. I mean, while we're on this page, which we seem to be, what was your view of this particular comic strip?
Well, I thought there's something very, very wrong about this comic page and most of the comic pages within this issue.
The materials? Okay, what is wrong with it?
What is it about this panel? Let's say the layout of it.
The
layout of it is different from all of the comics that we've looked at and I like to look at.
Is it worse? I mean, I can't really tell. I'm not a doctor of comics.
Something about it was creeping me out.
What is wrong with it?
And what's wrong with it is that there are 5 rows.
And what are they normally?
4.
So there's 5 rows on a page instead of 4. That now I can see what's going on here.
Because Tom and Jerry, which is the main one, that has got 4 rows like a normal comic that we have. But almost all of the others, there's Pink Panther, that's got 5. Texas Ted's got 5. They've all got, and I think it's partly because it's a taller, so TV comic is A4 size, whereas most of the ones we look at are a bit shorter than that. But also, it's not a DC Thompson comic. It's not an IPC comic. This is published by a company called Polystyle.
Right. So who the hell were they?
That's a good question, which I'm really glad you've asked.
Do you know?
My extensive notes say Polystyle were not IPC or DC Thompson. That's quite the most of it. But I think with these various newspaper companies tried to put out comics, they all got amalgamated, and they became Polystyle at the end. So there's all sorts of things about this comic are not quite the same as normal ones. So I think one thing is they've all got page numbers, which they didn't always have those. Interesting, I thought, we've looked at a lot of comics and they've got rhymes at the top of the page.
Yeah.
All of these ones, every single one says, here's what's happening next week at the bottom of the page.
Okay, yeah.
And it's nice. It's all kind of things like that where the paper is different. The paper's glossier, isn't it? I mean, this comic is 54 years old, but it looks the colours are still there. So it's printed in a different way. And when I read it, it just felt slightly wrong. It's like a comic that's arrived from another dimension, where history wasn't quite the same as it was here, and they're done very slightly differently. It's uncanny valley sort of thing.
Well, yeah, because I know what you mean, because I thought something was weird when I was reading that there's a Bugs Bunny page here. Look at that. I mean, there's hundreds of drawings on that page.
It's crammed for the picture.
So there's 5 rows, and there's 3, sometimes 4 panels. So it's an pretty intense read, and there's a lot going on in each page, which you'd think would be good, wouldn't you?
Yeah, well, I quite enjoyed it. I mean,
yeah,
spoilers to the end, but I actually really I enjoyed it more than I thought I was going to.
Well, TV comic is quite sort of thin, it looks to me, even though you said it's sort of more glossy. I mean, what is there? There's only, it tells you how many pages there are. There's 20 pages, that's it. It was 9 shillings, is that? 9D.
9D's 9 pence.
9 pence.
9 old pence.
Wow.
I'm older than you, clearly.
So you can remember that. Yeah. So, yeah, not all of these comic strips. Most of them are TV related, but there's 1 or 2 that are not. But we'll come on to that as we go through them. So it's the first thing it says on the top here, laugh with Pink Panther on page 7. I didn't. Do we get a refund? No, I mean, I'm being a little bit cruel. But
no, I think you should get your 9 old pence back.
Yeah, exactly. Well, new pence would be fine. I presume it didn't say old pence on the actual coins, because how would they have known that they're old?
That's a good.
But anyway,
we do say old pence on this.
Yeah,
well, our grandchildren will find out, Obadiah.
But this is sort of fun. So every Monday this came out, every single week for blooming 30 years, pretty much.
Incredible, isn't it?
Just unbelievable. 30 years every week. So it must have been pretty popular, I presume. And it says here, weekend in 26th September 1970. So it starts off, the cover stars are Tom and Jerry. So, I mean, I loved the cartoon. Still very funny, the cartoon, in my view. What do you think of the sort of comic strip version of it here?
So what happens in this one is basically Tom and Jerry have a wrestling match. And it raises many questions for me. I thought...
I've never seen a cat and a mouse having a wrestling match.
Well, it's unrealistic, isn't it?
It's very much
true, yeah. And there are cats and mice in the audience together.
I actually really liked that. I thought that was a really good sort of detail there.
It's good. I mean, like everything in this comic, it looks really good.
It looks brilliant.
And the colours are fabulous, aren't they?
It looks exactly like the cartoon from an art point of view.
I think it looks like our memory of the cartoon, doesn't it? It's active. Lots is going on.
Yeah,
and it's all about wrestling.
All in wrestling.
Yeah.
Which I suppose was popular in 1970.
Well, it was massive in 1970, yeah.
I suppose that's quite a good idea for Tom and Jerry, is it? I don't know.
Well, it's funny because they keep doing jokes like they say, oh, what an aeroplane spin, and how's that for a drop kick? And they keep using all this wrestling terminology. So they must have expected that kids would have been watching World of Sport and watching the wrestling, mustn't they?
But obviously the cartoons, in most of the cartoons, certainly the original ones, Tom and Jerry don't speak. They don't say anything.
No, that's true.
And here, I suppose, because it's a comic, there's only a limited amount you can do, maybe. So they're all having a good old chat during this wrestling match. Yeah, there's a lot of comic violence going on, like the cartoons. So that's fairly accurate in its representation. I mean, do you think this was written specifically for TV comic? Was it taken from, American Mad?
They're all written specifically for TV comic.
Huh.
So I wondered about that. So I did a bit of digging into it because there's things like when you get to Laurel and Hardy and the Inspector Clouseau, they are drawn very much in the style of the cartoons.
Yeah.
There are literally thousands of pre-existing American comic strips based on Bugs Bunny or Tom and Jerry or Popeye or whatever. They still made their own ones for the
That
TV.
is interesting. I wonder why they did that. They probably didn't have to do that.
Probably cheaper.
Because Cheeky Weekly had reprints of a couple of Warner Brothers characters. You know, I could just tell they were reprints at the time. I could be wrong now. If anyone's listening who wants to write in and correct me, by all means. I mean, I'm no expert, unlike Dr. Mark Hibbert.
Cheeky, if you're listening in your dotage, please give us an email at this address.
DREDGEHIBBETT@gmail.com.
Yeah, Tom and Jerry. Yeah, we quite like that. We quite like that.
Quite liked it,
Yeah, it wasn't bad.
It's pleasant enough.
TV terrors, we've sort of covered. What I quite like about it is that he's talking about one of the comic strips that's going to come up later. I thought that was quite a nice sort of linking device. He says, this bloke Hoppet says, it's good to be home and get the feet up. I'm really looking forward to seeing Titch and Quackers on the telly tonight. And that is one of the comic strips that comes later on. So I thought that was quite clever.
Well, there's quite a lot. I think one of the interesting things about TV comic is that apparently there was quite a lot of this crossing over between different strips from one to the other. And that's why, just to give everybody a glance behind the curtain, it was really hard finding stuff out about this comic, I thought, because almost everything about this comic is covered by Doctor Who fans. Because there's a Doctor Who strip in this.
There's a Doctor Who strip, yeah.
And Doctor Who fans are crazy for this sort of thing. So most of the stuff I found out about this was in relation to that character having crossed over with Doctor Who at some point.
That is fascinating. So let's have a look at Doctor Who while you're talking about it, do you think? So, yeah, on page 18, for those listening at home, we have Doctor Who. So it's the John Pertwee Doctor Who I grew up with, really. That's the earliest Doctor I can remember.
Me too.
I mean, you're a big Doctor Who fan, aren't you? I like it, but I'm not a big fan or anything.
Yeah, well, these strips are like, they've had a kind of reappraisal, I think, because when you read it, it's like going, well, this is clearly written by someone with only a glancing appreciation of Doctor Who. He's called Doctor Who.
Yeah.
Correct. They address him as Doctor Who.
Yeah, there's a bloke here who says at one point, what is Doctor Who up to?
And it's very different. It's like they're driving around. There's lots of guns and things in this. Doctor Who gets off in a helicopter and they chase after it's all good fun. He's in a helicopter chasing after a robot. It would have been amazing if they could have done this in the actual TV show.
Well, this sort of reminded me of one of the few Tom Baker episodes I watched recently, where it's called Robot.
I've seen that one recently.
And there's this massive robot wandering about, and it's not that dissimilar to this sort of story, you could say, possibly.
But in that story, there's an amazing bit where they go, call in the army, bring in a tank, and then an actual, real-life, literal plastic Action Man tank is pushed across the front of the screen, and you're like going, no,
please push it off again. That makes me want to watch it again. Things like that I really love, actually. But the art is sort of okay, isn't it? It's not brilliant.
It's not brilliant. Everybody's got a weird, stretchy head, haven't they?
I mean, Doctor Who looks almost like Popeye in this here.
He does.
It's like, it's John Pertwee here. But yeah, I see what you mean. They've all got stretched heads.
Yeah.
That's scary in itself, as you say.
And his assistant is basically a dolly bird from the 1960s with a massive haircut, isn't it?
Yeah, or just a massitive head.
Just a massive head, could be, yeah. So it's
reasonably exciting, isn't it? It's reasonably exciting.
It's all right, I think. I think these have been, people now like these, and it's like, oh, this is an interesting curio. And I think some of these strips have been done as audio versions as well, so it's been brought back into the fold.
That's nice, actually.
And I think the main thing we can say about this is it's much better than the Avengers strip.
Let's go now to the Avengers strip. For the benefit of the tape, I'm now turning to page, what is it? I don't know. Page 4.
Page 4.
Where we see some sort of representation of the Avengers.
The Avengers, again, with weird, stretchy heads.
The Steed and, who is it, Tara King, I think it's meant to be, although, you can't really see in this light, can you?
I'd like it if they called Steve the Avenger. That would be good.
Hello, Steve the Avenger. How's it going? I mean, he may well have a large head, but he's got a large bowler hat over it, so we can't really see that. So, yeah, I don't know what you thought about this version of the Avengers, but it doesn't really look an enormous amount like the Avengers that I remember. I don't think the art's particularly strong.
I think it's the same guy drawing both, isn't it?
I think it is.
But what struck me is like, I think the cliffhanger in the last episode was that they're driving along and a cowboy appears and points a gun at them. And they get out of that by, so he says, oh, it's all right, I'm not a real cowboy, it's just a cowboy show. And then at the end, the cliffhanger is they see two cowboys having a gunfight and one shoots the other. And I'm sort of thinking, how could they possibly get out of that in the next one?
It's just like, it's not a very good story, particularly. It's not very reminiscent of the Avengers as I remember it. Like the Doctor Who thing wasn't enormously reminiscent of Doctor Who. So I think it's the same guy.
However, the next page, Mighty Moth. What did you think of this?
Mighty Moth. So it's a bloke called Dad, some middle-aged geezer, and there's this moth called Mighty Moth who flies around bothering him all the time, and he tries to get rid of this moth, and that is essentially the story, I believe.
He's trying to murder the moth.
He's trying to murder it. Oh, that sounds
which is
scary.
Well, it's the same idea as Scaredy Cat, I think, that we looked at last time. There's quite a lot of these where some of the characters are trying to literally kill one of the other characters and hilariously failing. But I really like this. I think it looks... Who did the art? Dick Millington is the guy who drew it. And it's a really nice style. It's really funny. It looks funny, I think. It looks really slick. There's a brilliant bit here on row 4 where there's a police detective interviewing Dad for the kidnapping that he thinks he's done. And he's got his foot up on the chair, and it's just a really dynamic, funny looking... The panel layouts are imaginative. It's absolutely great.
Again, this wasn't on television at all.
And it's got nothing to do with television.
There's a bit where the dad puts this moth in a jam jar, and then puts the jam jar in a trunk, and then puts the trunk in something else. And at the end, Mighty Moth flies out and he's fine. I don't think that's very realistic, do you?
I don't think that's realistic at all.
No, I think we should complain to Dick Millington.
I spent 60 pence on this. But I love that it's like he's caught a moth. And what he's doing, he's not going to like swap the moth or anything like that.
No.
Or trick it, or just like let the moth go out the window. He's put him in a jar. He's put the jar in a box. He's sealed the box. He's taken the box out and he's about to throw it in the river. And I do like the fact that he does all this stuff, and then a policeman turns up and quite legitimately says, "What the hell are you doing? Trying to throw a case into the river in the middle of the night?" And then he gets arrested and questioned. He's like, "Going good."
Yeah, that's the realism for you.
That is what it is realistic after all.
So Mighty Moth gets a thumbs up from us. But then moving on to page 8, we have something called Titch and Quackers. What do we know about this blooming thing?
Well, Titch and Quackers is about a boy and a duck who have some adventures, and they live in the house of Ray Allen, the comedian and ventriloquist.
That's right. It's got at the bottom here, Ray Allen Enterprises, 1970.
And it's based on a TV show called Titch and Quackers, of which there is almost no evidence left anywhere. So all I've managed to find is there was a short clip of it on YouTube.
Very short, about 30 seconds or something. Yeah. That is it.
It is.
Remember, this is 1970.
This was 1970, yeah.
So there's nothing really remaining of it. But there is this record that I sent you that I found on YouTube. This song.
Oh, it's awful.
This terrible song, Christmas song, called something like Santa's Got a Cold or something.
Santa's Got a Terrible Cold.
Yeah, and that was no good.
What possesses anybody to go, I'm going to write a song and it's going to be about Santa having a cold? You go, what's going to happen? Nothing.
Yeah.
And, I know what'll happen. A duck will quack every now and again.
But it's interesting that there's no real visual footage left of it. So the only things that remain of it are the comic strips in TV comic and the annuals, but the footage is gone.
I don't think it's a great loss.
Not a great loss to the world, but what did you think of the actual story here?
The story's like... I mean, it's a kid. He's trying to get. Is he after money or is he after? Oh, he's after fruit drops, isn't he?
He wants a few sweets, and then he goes in the sweet shop, and it turns out that one of his school colleagues has bought all the sweets, and he's hidden them in some sort of shed, and he tries to sell them back to Titch and of course Quackers. Titch hasn't got the money for that or something, so he tries to get in the tuck shop that this rich twit has set up. They end up going up a tree, and they fall through the roof of this tuck shop and end up eating all the sweets.
And when they're eating all the sweets, he makes it very, very clear they're not stealing these sweets. They should give him a fair price for them.
Yeah, because there's a big sign on the wall. Dear Percy, we're only taking what we pay for. The money's on the table. Signed, Titch and Quackers. So very clearly, They're not thieves.
They're acting within the law. It's all right, kids. TV comic does not agree with theft.
No, it definitely does not. It says it several times. It makes the point that he's going to leave the money. Well, nip in, take some sweets, and leave the money. And leave the money.
Do you think there was an original version of this strip where they didn't do that, and then the editor said no?
I think you're right. Yeah, I think that's probably right.
Probably Ray Allen. It had to go past Ray Allen, and Lord Charles looked at us. You silly arse! We can't have this.
That was when ventriloquism was current and was seen as entertainment. Certainly no more.
And I just realised we've just done audio ventriloquism there, reviving an age-old stupidity.
Yeah. Well, there used to be ventriloquism on the radio, of course, didn't there? With Educating Archie in the 50s.
Yeah.
That was before many people had any good ideas, though.
John.
What?
Do you like world stamps?
Yeah.
How would you like 50 different world stamps?
Actually, I would like that amount.
Then send postage for approvals to J. Reginson of 74 Swanage House, Swanage Road, Southend-on-Sea. But please, tell your parents.
What, now?
Guess.
Okay. Thanks. 50 different world stamps. Welcome to part 2 of the Funny Comics Fan Club with you, Dr. Mark Hibbett.
And me, Dr. John Dredge.
That's not right.
That's not right at all, is it?
So, we've moved to our second studio.
You may have heard the orchestra moving in to the studio next door during part 1, and so we thought we'd give them the space.
Yeah, I mean, they came down, they said, do you want any music? We said, we're all right. But so they did seem a bit annoyed about that.
They didn't like it, did they?
They've got some rehearsing to do or something.
So that's why we thought we'd move. You don't be working next to an annoyed timpanist at the best of times.
You definitely don't. I can speak from experience.
But talking of music, John.
Talking of music, we are carrying on. It's part 2 of the TV comic review, ladies and gentlemen.
With Texas Ted, who begins Texas Ted's story by saying, "I'll sing you a little tune, cousin." And he's American. That's what was going on then.
Yeah, Texas Ted. You can tell probably from the his name that he is American, and almost, in fact, where he comes from.
Almost, yeah,
America. But it gives you a little idea of who he is because it says this guy is called Texas Ted, big hat, big head.
And the strip is a stereotype of Americans, where he's a big old guy from Texas called Ted, who is just a massive show off and thinks he's great at everything.
And he's singing with this acoustic guitar, and he sings to such a loud extent that a tree falls on somebody.
He's a big singer. That's how they go.
And that's what happens when you've got a really big voice. Trees fall over if you sing near them. And that's certainly what's happened here, isn't it?
It really is. It's like a safety guide, really. Don't sing loudly near trees,
otherwise they may fall on you. This has been a public information film. So the neighbour comes out with a huge sort of barrel of cotton wool that he's kept, and he's going to sort of stick it in Texas Ted's mouth, isn't he?
There's only one way to stop that mouth. Stop it up with cotton wool. He's like, well, you could ask him to be quiet.
That's the other way.
That's the other way to do it, really. There are at least 2 ways, I'd say.
Yeah. There's no letters page in this, I've just thought.
There is no letters page.
Someone could have written in to say another way of dealing with Texas Ted is, as you say, to ask him to be quiet. But there's no letters page, so therefore they can't communicate.
That's probably why, to avoid that sort of situation. Because, I mean, to be honest, a lot of this, you could have said Titch and Quackers. Another way to solve that issue would be to go to a different sweet shop.
That's true.
Tom and Jerry. You could have gone through mediation.
Yeah, you could have had some sort of tribunal.
Exactly.
What is going on with polyester publications or whatever they're called?
Well, yeah, you're right, though. I hadn't noticed that.
There's no blooming letters page. 30 years and not a single letters page.
But then how do they know if strips people like?
And which one they don't like?
Exactly. There's
no way of telling.
It's like a comic from another dimension where things are quite slightly different.
There was no internet in 1970, as far as I'm aware. Or maybe a very basic one. black and white one.
Was off. I think the black and white ARPANET may have existed in the 1960s.
It's possible Arthur C. Clarke may have had one.
Arthur C. Clarke, he probably did. Arthur C. Clarke's going, nobody sent me an email again. And he said, I put loads of stuff on my Twitters.
I mean, Stephen Fry obviously had one.
Oh, yeah, and he probably had thousands of followers on the Twitters in 1970, yeah.
Douglas Adams obviously built it. But back to TV comic. And now here's something I found very interesting. You may well disagree, but here at the end, you see, right, in this Texas Ted story, this tree falls on a neighbor, and Texas Ted says, poor fella, he's out cold, right? The bloke that's allegedly out cold now says, you just don't know the strength of your own voice, cousin. Why is he talking when he's out cold?
I think the clue there is he says, you just don't know the strength of your own voice, cousin.
It's not his cousin.
Because the other character is his cousin.
Therefore, they've assigned the speech balloon to the wrong character.
I tell you what, it's no wonder they haven't got a letters page. The complaints that I've got about this.
I'm going to write to them now.
I think you should.
Yeah, and say, we want our 9 shillings back, or whatever it is.
It's going up.
Yeah, we want 9 new pence back. Not old pence, no, this old pence rubbish.
New pence now.
New pence or nothing.
And that will teach you.
Anyway, tune in next week when the Wild West gets wilder when Ted visits a cinema.
Can you imagine?
Doesn't sound that wild.
It doesn't really know.
Maybe they know something we don't. Moving swiftly on. Is this the highlight of the comic, we ask?
So this is Basil Brush, which is the centre page spread. So again,
colourful, nice and colourful.
Well, it's colourful, but if you note, a lot of the colours have great big white lines around them. So I'll put this up on the socials and on ARPANET so people can see it. But a lot of the colours have big white lines, and I wondered if that's because they didn't quite trust the printers to align the colours properly. So they've left big white gaps around everything just in case. But it looks super, doesn't it?
It looks good, and it's vibrant, and it leaps off the page at you. One thing I would say is that Basil Brush was really popular, for decades. I think probably still is really popular. But on those old 1970 Basil Brush shows, it was sketches. It was maybe they'd have a silly serial, they'd have a song, they'd have a guest come on, and they'd have a chat. That's not what happens in the TV comics version of Basil Brush.
No,
they've made him into this Lord of the Manor character, and they've given him a butler called Chummers. None of that is in the TV show. Although I read that they based his voice to some extent on Terry Thomas.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And so I guess they went the whole hog with this and turned him into a Terry Thomas Lord of the Manor personage. But I thought it was quite fun.
Well, I must confess it. I love Basil Brush. I think Basil Brush is amazing. I watched, there was a Basil Brush TV series on about 10 years ago. That was a kid's show. I watched every episode because it was great. And I went to the Edinburgh Fringe 2 years ago and went to see the Basil Brush show.
Oh, really?
And it was really exciting because Basil Brush came on. And I was just sitting there going like, oh, it's Basil Brush. It's actually Basil Brush. And like a tiny part of my brain was going like, you do know that Basil Brush, shut up, be quiet. It's actual Basil Brush here. It was really and at the end of the show, the guy doing the puppeteering came out and took a bow. And he's like, no.
You mean it's a puppet?
Oh, sorry, John, there was some other puppeteering going on that wasn't Basil Brush in this show. That's definitely what that's definitely what
But what was the show like then? What was it, sketches and stuff? Or?
Well, it was Basil Brush sat there and said, aha! And told a joke, and then a guest would come on and they'd ask some questions. And then occasionally he would rather delightfully veer into showbiz memories, which is brilliant. Say, oh, of course, in the 70s when I was with Mr. Roy, and you go, oh, this is nice. And then again, a tiny part of your brain was going, this is a different person doing it. And it's shut up, brain. It's Basil Brush. So it was an odd show, but the big thrill was it's Basil Brush. So the room was full of people of all ages going, oh, Basil Brush.
That's nice.
It was amazing.
I suppose the nearest thing I can think of now is like Sooty or something like that.
I guess so, yeah.
And like a few years ago, I interviewed the guy who does Sooty.
The guy who does Sooty?
Yeah.
What do you mean, not Sooty himself?
Oh, well, his fellow performer.
Oh,
his fellow performer. And he brought Sooty with him. And you just go back to being 5 years old again when you see this. It's sort of magic. It is a bit sort of magic.
It is magic. I suppose because they are cloth-based performers, we might call them, they don't age.
No.
So it is not literally, but almost literally, it's that same person exactly as you remember them still there.
And Sooty sounded almost exactly the same.
Indeed.
But Basil Brush, so I was looking for information on TV comic and the Basil Brush of the 70s, and I came across something.
Did you? What did you come across?
Well, in the year before, there was a TV comic holiday special. And in the centre pages, there was a board game, which was called Basil Brush Goes Rent Collecting.
Could you just repeat that for everybody who could go, no, I can't have heard right.
Basil Brush Goes Rent Collecting. We looked this up and printed out a copy of this game from 1969 it is. And it's quite an unusual concept, I think we can say. I can't read the rules, can you? I mean, I don't know if you can. You've got more powerful glasses than me.
The rules are for 2 to 4 players, so we could have a go. So basically what happens is you go around
the board
and you try and collect loads of money.
So you start off at Brush Manor, then you start going around the board, but then you land on these red squares and they say strange things like collect village rent from Diddy Men. But then you go on to the next square and it says Diddy Men's house collapses, go back to start. So if that doesn't get you, you can continue. You could be going quite happily along and you suddenly get to Laurel and Hardy pay month's rent in advance, collect £25.
Oh, thanks for Laurel and Hardy.
I can't see that happening myself. If you know anything about Laurel and Hardy, they won't have the month's rent in advance. You move forward another space, it says Popeye feeds Basil. Move forward 8 spaces, pick up rent.
Nobody's ever fed their landlord.
But then near the end, where you think you've got to the castle, which is where they're heading for some reason, you get on a space that says avoid TARDIS. Move back 8 spaces.
But the rent on the TARDIS, I mean, the TARDIS is the most desirable property. It's 25 quid.
25 quid rent. Yeah. So what do we glean from this? Basil Brush is a landlord.
He's a landlord.
And all the different characters in TV comic owe him rent. Because all the houses they're living in are owned by this Basil Brush.
It's a pretty bleak picture, isn't it? It's like something out of 2000 AD.
I mean, I really can't see Laurel and Hardy coming up with a rent.
It's just not realistic. It's just not realistic. And then there's this thing like, so Basil goes around and one of the properties, which he's technically legally supposed to be maintaining, collapses. So he's not a good landlord. He's a bad landlord. It's kind of ruining my childhood here that Basil Brush is like this.
It's upsetting. It's upsetting. And I can't imagine that many kids would know much about rent collecting.
In the 70s, they were probably working down mines, John.
I think they were.
To raise the rent. They probably knew all about it.
If it was Basil Brush goes down the mines, then, they'd have understood it. But nevertheless, it's always worth knowing about that game. You never know when it might come in handy. In later years, you'll just suddenly think, I wouldn't mind a game of Basil Brush goes rent collecting. Moving on now to page 12.
Astronaut. So this is where, because I thought Astronaut, well, obviously, this nonsense is one of the strips that they've devised especially for the comic. But it's not. It's an actual cartoon series.
Well, it's interesting because what it's about is this strange creature from another planet who lives with a fairly mild chap who works in an office somewhere. But then this creature takes him all around different planets and things. But the chap's name, I had to look into this. The chap's name is Oscar Wilde. That isn't mentioned in this comic strip, but nevertheless, that is his name. So a concession to humour there.
A very small concession.
Yeah, very small.
And Mr. Oscar Wilde is basically one day he goes, my neighbours have got a swimming pool.
He's annoyed about it.
He's annoyed about it.
He's very jealous.
So,
and then the astronaut says, well, they're not as lucky as you in some ways, Oscar. After all, it isn't everyone who can go whizzing through space once a week. True. He says, true.
He's accepting that.
He agrees with him.
All right. I've got a mate with a spaceship. I got to say he's better than having a pool.
In some ways.
In some ways, I guess.
In some ways, it is. What a stupid panel that is.
So they to prove that this is correct, to cheer him up a bit, they go after a space planet with space people in it and some water and some cliffs.
And at the end, he says, do you still envy your rich neighbours, Oscar? To which Oscar replies, not anymore. Wahey! And he jumps into some sort of space swimming pool.
What an ungrateful sod Oscar is, really, isn't he? You think, like, you've got access to a spaceship here?
And you're jealous of your next door neighbour's swimming pool?
And think of all the incredible things you can do. It's like, I'd just like some alien creatures to make some simulacrum of a swimming pool, really. And that's all I'll do with it. Because you're not going to go and explore strange new worlds or solve the mysteries. No, I'm going swimming. Yes. Oscar Miserable, his name should be.
Oscar Flaming Annoying. Let's pass on from Astronaut to the comic strip version of Deputy Dog.
But do you remember Deputy Dog? Or do you remember Eddie Large's impersonation of Deputy Dawn?
I just about remember the cartoon, and I sort of remembered Eddie Large.
Because was the cartoon that Deputy Dog would keep turning up when a very thin man was trying to play a song on his guitar?
That's Texas Ted.
That's Texas. That is Texas Ted.
Earlier in the comic, that is. But I don't know. I mean, this wasn't a particularly good story. There's a bit where the point of it is Deputy Dog wants to go out and buy some paint, some drip dry paint.
Yeah.
And then he ends up...
which is a thrilling proposal. He's going to buy some paint.
What a story.
What sort of paint? Drip dry paint. Oh, in that case.
Oh, now we're interested. But then he buys this drip dry paint. It's in the shape of a jelly. What's going on there?
I didn't understand. Now, this must be something from the past, mustn't it?
Jelly paint.
Jelly paint.
Paint that looks like a jelly.
And so the Native American characters are going, well, I'm going to paraphrase for purposes of not saying what, but he says, this isn't paint, it's jelly. He's cheated us. And the horse says, don't they know jelly paint when they see it? It's like,
Well,
what?
I don't know what jelly paint is when I see it. I've never heard of it.
Was jelly? Yeah.
Was it a thing? Let us know. Write in.
Yeah. If you're from Farrow and Ball, if you're listening, drop us a line.
We've got a letters page, unlike this.
Yeah.
Jelly paint.
So I grew up in the 70s. So
Me too.
everybody who grew up in the 70s is like, there was a lot of painting and decorating going on.
There's a lot of paint about.
Tins opened and unopened, lying around in garages with screwdrivers there. At no point was jelly paint mentioned.
No, I've never heard of it. So therefore, I'd write to the letters page if there was one. Now I think we can see why there wasn't one.
I think we're getting a picture of why that is, isn't it?
In fact, they give the address on here: TV Comic Polystyle Publications Limited, Polly Parkins House, Paddington Green, in Edgware Road. Yeah, that's where the letters could be sent.
I'm going round. As soon as we finish this,
We're getting on the tube to
Polly Parkins
Paddington. Yeah.
House.
Then we have page 15, Bugs Bunny. About 48 drawings here.
But it's crammed in, isn't it? There's
Crammed with
loads
detail.
of text. But I thought this worked quite well because it does feel very, very Bugs Bunny. So again, it says at the bottom of the page, copyright 1970 Warner Brothers by arrangement with Western Publishing Company. So that's the company who did Gold Key Comics in America, who published actual Bugs Bunny comics. And I thought, oh, right, so they have licensed it. But no, apparently, according to Lou Stringer, Lou Stringer says this was drawn by Bill Titcomb, who drew loads of these sorts. So it's a British strip, but it really captures the Bugs Bunny-ness of Bugs Bunny, doesn't it?
Totally does, yeah. I thought this was probably one of the best pages in the whole thing.
Because there's a brilliant bit where Elmer Fudd, for reasons best known to himself, has a lot of dynamite. And Bugs Bunny says, why not... I'm not going to do the Bugs Bunny voice.
No,
because I can't.
because you can't. Okay.
Why not start with lighting the fuses? Here, let me help you. And Elmer Fudd says...
Thank you, Wabbit.
Then Elmer Fudd thinks a moment, and it's delightfully pacing this. And then Elmer Fudd says...
Why should that Wabbit want to help me with my dynamiting?
And then it goes...
Boom.
And it's lovely, isn't it? So it's very Bugs Bunny. It's
Very Bugs Bunny.
beautifully timed in the comic. I thought it was great.
This might be the best comic page in the whole comic.
It's definitely up there, isn't it? It's definitely in the 1 or 2. It's not in an I don't like.
No, we both like this one. Now we come to Larry Harmon's Laurel and Hardy. Not Hal Roach's Laurel and Hardy.
Not Laurel and Hardy's Laurel and Hardy.
So this Larry Harmon guy I think he bought some sort of the rights to Laurel and Hardy so he could use it in a cartoon. I think this was when Stan Laurel was sort of nearing the end of his life. And so Larry Harmon bought the license to Laurel and Hardy. And he said, he wanted to turn it into some fun cartoons. And Stan Laurel obviously thought, well, yeah, I can see that working. Quite a lot of what we did was very cartoony. So this Larry Harmon made, it says here, 156 5-minute cartoons.
Wow.
And I think Stan Laurel sort of got to see one of them or something. And he wrote a letter to somebody and said, this is lousy. And it was. I mean, if you see it, it is not a good cartoon.
I've never ever seen the cartoons, but I have seen a lot of these comic strips because there was always like annuals and things, and it cropped up a lot.
It's pretty bad.
It's lousy. I think
lousy.
Stan Laurel was quite right there. It's lousy, and this is a not a well written story. Again, the art is quite nice. The drawing is good, but it's very little to do with the Laurel and Hardy that we all love. Yeah. So they go to a lecture on the history of transport
for no reason.
For no reason at all. And the guy who's giving this lecture, I work in academia, and let me tell you, this is subpar, because he says the earliest recorded form of transport was a single dinosaur-powered rock. No, it wasn't.
Yes,
Citation required.
It's just the story itself. I think we can say leaves a lot to be desired, if not everything.
But again, I think we come back to what we've said a lot here. It looks great.
Looks great.
The art in these stories is almost always great. It always looks really good. The writing is very often not.
As a kid, I did like these cartoons, but it doesn't really reflect the genius of the original live action Laurel and Hardy, does it?
If this was all, if so, with what's it called? With Titch and Quackers, all we've got left as Titch and Quackers is the comic strip, and you're going like, okay, maybe if this was all we had left of Laurel and Hardy, I think their legacy would not be safe. Would it?
They would have died out a year later without any doubt.
Paying no attention there whatsoever.
So Laurel must have been a bit hacked off when he saw the cartoon. I expect he was probably expecting genius level Bugs Bunny material, but sadly he got sort of subpar Secret Squirrel material.
Yeah,
it was just.
Well, it's similar, isn't it? Too. It reminds me of the Beatles cartoon.
Similar thing, yeah.
And obviously, the Beatles saw the Beatles cartoon and went, "Oh, this is lousy."
Yeah, this is lousy.
And that's why they don't do the voices in the Yellow Submarine movie, because they assumed the Yellow Submarine movie would be like the Beatles cartoon. And then they saw the cartoon and went, "Oh, hang on a minute, this is great." And that's why they're in at the end. And so they are actually in it.
But I saw this interview with George Harrison though, and he said something like, when they went to meet Elvis, he said they were all in the same car, and he said, when we got up to Graceland, someone opened the door and we all fell out of the car like one of those Beatles cartoons.
Which brings us to our final page, the back page.
Oh, what do you know? We've got Popeye on the back here. Hoedown Showdown, this episode's called. Not a bad title.
It's funny it's got a title, isn't it? Not many of the strips do have titles. But
why is that then? We don't know.
But, the story, again, the material isn't exactly A1, is it?
But the material's odd because it involves lots of puns based on sailing terminology. So what happens at the start is that Popeye's going, do you want to say what he says? Because
I gotta look my best because I'm taking Olive to the hoedowns tonight.
It's amazing.
And then Brutus, not Bluto here, Brutus, for copyright reasons, he says, that's what he thinks. I don't know what he sounds like.
And then he pours
a load of tar over
a whole barrel of tar, and says, "Now you are a real Jack Tar."
It's not easy to get a barrel of tar now. In the 70s, again, it was everywhere. Yeah, the jelly paint
falling over. Jelly paint.
You couldn't go anywhere without falling over barrels of tar.
That's why we had to hire wrestlers to carry them around for us all the time. They were heavy. Yeah,
we'd say, "Hey, Big Daddy, bring us that tar." But
giant haystacks. Pop down the shops to get some jelly paint. Yeah, that's how we go. That's what it was like.
But anyway, this story is, so he's covered in tar. He tries to get it off.
But he says, "Now you are a real Jack Tar," which is an ancient term for a sailor.
Is it?
Yeah, that's the joke there, Joe. That's the joke you're missing.
Oh, that's the joke I'm missing.
It's one of the many jokes you're missing in this. But yes, a jolly Jack Tar is a sailor. A sailor would be called a Jack Tar. So he covers him in tar because he's a sailor.
I'm glad you explained that. Now it's really funny.
And thence the humour only escalates.
And then he goes, he's annoyed because he's covered in tar because he's going to this dance. So he doesn't want to look all sort of terrible. So he tries to get the tar off. And then Olive's dancing with Brutus.
Not Bluto.
Not Bluto. For copyright reasons, it's Brutus. And I'm surprised they didn't call him iPop or something. They couldn't get, at least they got the rights to the name. So Brutus he's going to beat up Popeye for some reason.
Well, he's because Popeye's attracting all the women folk because they go, "Oh my, that man has a handsome tan."
So that's going to attract all the women.
Because, of course, we didn't have tans in the 1970s because there was no sunshine. Everything was black and white.
That's true. So anyway, Olive Oil gives Popeye some spinach because she doesn't like Brutus suddenly.
Despite having danced in it for most of the night.
She's gone right off him. So then Popeye eats all the spinach and smacks Brutus through the window. And that's about it.
No. Again, you're missing another joke here. You're missing another brilliant joke. So they've gone to a hoedown.
Yeah.
So what happens is Popeye hits Brutus. He goes flying out the window. Later, after the dance, as it says.
That sure was a happy hoedown, Olive.
That is what he says. And then they go out, and it turns out that Brutus went flying through the shop of a garden tools. So Brutus,
he went what?
Brutus goes flying through the window of a garden tools shop.
It's much harder to explain once you start thinking about it.
It does. I was trying not to think about
It's
it.
very difficult to understand.
And so Brutus, not Bluto.
So even though you're a doctor of comics, this has almost been beyond it.
It's almost defeated me. It's almost made me have to hand it back. That professorship is a long way off now.
So can I just go over this again? He's not Brutus, not Bluto. Through the window of the shop.
Well, he's knocked him through the window of the hoedown centre first of all.
The hoedown centre.
It's the hoedown centre. Yes,
Is
that's
it? Is that where you have a hoedown?
Where else would you have a hoedown?
There's nothing here saying "come to the hoedown centre." There's no label on.
Oh, let's go to the polka shed. He says no, they're having polka in the polka shed.
So they go to the hoedown, where essentially there is a showdown.
There is indeed a showdown at the hoedown. Now, if they said that in this story, this would have been a much better story altogether. But no.
Sorry. So one moment. He's knocked him through the window of the hoedown centre.
Hoedown centre, yes.
Hoedown centre. I've never heard of a hoedown centre, but nevertheless, I'll take your word for
You've
it.
never heard of a Jack Tar either, to be fair.
No, that's true. So he's gone through the window.
Of the hoedown centre.
Yeah. And then he says at the end, it looks as if Brutus had a hoedown and the rest of the tools in the window too. Half.
So now you understand the hilarity of that.
I can see where they're getting at now.
He's landed amongst some...
Yeah.
Brutus has landed amongst some hoes.
Okay.
That's what's happened there.
That's what's happened.
In a nice...
Garden tools.
He's
landed there.
He must have.
landed
And the tanned Popeye is drawing attention to the fact that he's not only had a hoedown.
No, he's had a showdown.
No, he's not said that.
Hasn't he? No, he has had that.
He has had a hoedown.
In that hoedown.
Yes. And now he's lying amongst the hoes and also the spades and some buckets. And some rakes.
And some rakes. So there, I'm afraid we must leave Popeye to his
for our own sakes and for our own mental health.
I think we got there in the end.
I don't know where we got to, but we did get there.
Yeah. If you'd like a detailed fact sheet on hoedown, showdown, write into us today.
At the hoedown centre.
I don't think it was a centre, but we'll be here all night discussing hoedown centres.
But alas,
we've come to the end.
We've come to the end. So, John, what two strips did you like, and which one didn't you like?
Okay, well, I really liked the Bugs Bunny one because it reflected the cartoon very well and was nicely drawn. And I guess I like Basil Brush. So just all the bees for me, Basil Brush and Bugs Bunny.
Yeah, they were lovely. I really liked Mighty Moth. I thought Mighty Moth was lovely. I thought that was a proper comic.
Hold on. Oh, that's only one. So
I'm going to agree with you with Basil Brush. I think because it's Basil Brush.
Yeah, good character and a good rent collector.
Well, I know I'm going to ignore that.
Okay, that's in the past.
That's in the past. We've all made mistakes.
And okay, what was the one you didn't like? I mean, another one I didn't.
Which one didn't you like?
I hated the Laurel and Hardy one.
Oh, that was awful.
Because I love live action Laurel and Hardy. So this is just a terrible, what do you call it? A travesty.
It is
of what Laurel and Hardy were.
And I think I'll go with you because, in addition, because I remember whenever I go to a jumble sale and buy an old annual that I didn't want, and there was Laurel, it also makes the Laurel and Hardy strips makes me feel a bit queasy because there's something not right about it. They just look off and they don't act in the same way. So yeah, we're gonna, when we write our letter to Polly Styles to demand now 15 old pence back, I think we'll say, look, no.
Was Polly Styles the editor? That's what I wondered.
Polly Styles, no, it's Polly Perkins. It was Polly Perkins' house. Have you not been paying attention to yourself?
No.
Polly Perkins' house in Paddington. Polly Styles.
You sure it was a hoedown centre? Eh?
It was a hoedown centre. I don't know where else you think hoedowns occur.
Well, in a barn. I mean, they're not.
Oh, yeah, that's probably.
I can't imagine that they'd be. It's too English calling it a centre, isn't it? Let's go to the garden centre, or let's go to the hoedown centre.
Yeah.
That's what you'd get in Nuneaton, not in wherever Popeye lives.
No, because Popeye lives in Bedford. Everybody knows that.
If you know where Popeye lives, keep it to yourself. And so we come to the end of Funny Comics Fan Club. Yeah?
But all that remains, Johnny, is for me to present you with next edition's comic. And here it is. For this purposes of the tape, I'm passing John a copy of Topper and Sparky comic.
That looks brilliant.
And it's massive, isn't it? It's a massive, great thing.
Wow. This is twice the size of a TV comic.
It literally is twice the size of TV comics. It's amazing.
Looks brilliant. And only 7p.
But you go, it's about 7 new p as well. None of this old p nonsense. So we'll be getting to that next time. All that remains, I believe, is to say thank you very much for listening.
And until next time, it's me, not Dr. John Dredge,
And me, actually Dr. Mark Hibbett.
saying, that's all, folks.